Delighted to be here today and to speak with you on a little different perspective than what we've talked about thus far. You haven't seen many pictures of horses. Much of the world does not eat horse meat. Much of the world does eat horse meat. And I have been involved in the United States over the last 4 or 5 years trying to preserve the right of horse owners in the United States to have their horse processed for human consumption if they choose to, and sell it to that part of the world that does not object to eating horse meat. My philosophy is pretty simple. I grew up on a farm. I've spent my whole life in agriculture on the political side for the last 30-something years and on the producing side. And when it comes to animal welfare, I want to associate my remarks with the gentlelady from South Africa and others who have talked about animal welfare and the recognition that those of us who produce it know a little bit more about humane treatment and the positive production of food than those who object to our current form of livestock production. And here let me make one point. That is, when I talk about horses specifically in just a moment, remember that what has happened to horse processing in the United States is exactly what the animal rights / welfare groups around the world want to see to production agriculture as we know it today. And I respect their view. I differ with it, but I respect their view, to have a different view than I have. And in the United States, we believe in majority rule. And we lost horse processing in the United States Congress by a majority rule. And therefore, the message to our producers, we had better start talking to our consumers and having them understand our side of it rather than the other side of it. Now, here, another point I want to make, and that is those folks, and I respect their views, that have a different view of animal rights and animal welfare than I do, also have a different view on biotechnology and fossil fuels. And I will submit to you, as the world grows by some 3 billion people over the next 50 years, the world cannot be fed without technology, biotechnology. And to those who object to that, do so at your own risk. I told my constituents that I had the privilege of representing for 26 years, be careful when you ask me to do something for you in government, lest we do it to you. Be careful what you ask government to do for you. Lessons from an animal welfare decision in the United States on horses. Now, a horse is a beautiful animal. I come from Texas. Horses are special. I've spoken to many Native Americans, our Indian population, who have the same view that I have. Horses are special animals, but they have to be treated humanely. Again, my view, as we have tried to debate this issue in the United States Congress, is if you own a horse and you do not wish it to be processed for human consumption, I'm for you. Take care of your horse. Feed it. Care for it until it dies a natural death, if you're so fortunate to be able to provide for that. Or you can have it euthanized, have its life ended by a veterinarian with chemical. Or if you live out in the country, a bullet and natural progression of the end of the life of a horse, disposed of the carcass by coyotes and other wild animals, if that be your choice. Now, first off, the horse industry in the United States is a very big industry. 9.2 million horses, 4.6 million people are directly involved, 400,000 full-time jobs, $39 billion industry, $102 billion impact on the United States economy, generating $1.9 billion in taxes. That's the horse industry. How do we use our horses in the United States? Recreation, showing, racing, and other. Now here's what's happened. In 1990, we processed in the United States 345,000 horses for human consumption. By 1994, as the objection to processing horses for human consumption began to build, we were down to about 140,000. And we started with 16 abattoirs, and then we were down to 9. And as I got involved in this in my post-Congress world as a lobbyist, we had gotten down to 3 processing plants, 2 in Texas and 1 in Illinois. And then Congress, in its wisdom, decided that was 3 too many. And Congress took away the funding for the federal inspection of horses, which meant that we could no longer sell horses to Europe, horse meat, to Europe or Japan, our 2 primary customers. And you see what's happened since then. If you look at the red line, that's how many we were processing in 2006. We eliminated processing at the end of 2007, and therefore no horses were processed in the United States since 2007. But you notice United States horses have continued to go up in the number being processed. It's just that they are no longer processed in the United States. They're processed in Mexico and Canada, our neighbors to the south and to the north. Now, the unintended consequences of this have been pretty well observed. Increased horse exports to Mexico and Canada, which has prompted the political outcry of those who have a different opinion of saying, we must pass a law saying that no horse may be shipped to Canada or Mexico for purposes of slaughter. My question is, how are you going to do that? In a world that we have already heard so much of today, we are now getting smaller and smaller. We're in a marketplace. We're all competing in that marketplace. Many times we producers are our own worst enemies by asking government to do something to protect us in that marketplace against perceived unfair competition. And sometimes that's true. But most of us today are beginning to recognize, be careful what we ask our government to do, because the world is getting smaller. Inhumane treatment of horses. Shipping a horse from the middle of the United States to Mexico or to Canada is a long trip. And we passed many laws. I participated when I was in Congress passing many laws to provide special treatment for horses because horses are special animals. You can't ship them as long distances. You have to provide different facilities. You've got to take them off and feed them. All of this has been done for the purposes of respecting the animal called a horse. The unintended consequences now begins to find that we have a few problems today. The diminished value of horses. Take competition away from a marketplace. If you're a producer, you know what that means to your bottom line. The more competition you have for that which you are selling, the better the price is going to be, and the better the consumer is going to be taken care of. When you eliminate competition, the prices drop. One of my clients is the Livestock Marketing Association, the 560 markets that used to sell horses. Now we have to tell you when you come in to sell your horse, we might be able to sell it if it's a good kid's pony or it's a good riding horse, it's something, you like its beauty, we'll sell it. But if you object to that killer buyer, as they're called, buying it, we may not be able to sell it unless it's okay with you, and he may buy it for $10 or 20. When we had the 3 plants in the United States back in 2006, the average value of a horse went from $300 to $700 being sold to the processing plant. Today, it is much less than that. Diminished value has created another problem. Horses being starved because the owner has run out of money. Maybe dad lost his job. Maybe mom lost her job. All of a sudden you can't keep the kid's pony and you can't bear to get rid of it. Therefore, what do? You reduce its amount of feed and you get the results. Now, none of us, this is what you usually see on YouTube of some livestock market or somebody has mistreated the animal, but you don't see this from the people that purport to take care of their animals. Now, we have a large number of folks that have their heart in the right place and they start rest homes for horses, is what I call them. To take care of an unwanted horse. Bring me your horse. And they do a wonderful job, but every single one of them are full now because the demand for taking care of unwanted horses has exceeded the supply. And therefore you get what I just showed you, and I don't want to leave that picture up there because it makes me cringe when I see what is happening. Thanks to government inaction. Government inaction. Government deciding because the Humane Society of the United States of America was concerned about processing horses for human consumption and therefore convinced the Congress of the United States to eliminate that possibility. But now, even PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, and I will tell you, this is the first time in my life that I have ever spoken publicly and said I agree with something PETA has said. But I do. Ingrid Newkirk, there was a rush to pass a bill that said you can't slaughter horses anymore in the United States, but the reason we didn't support it is the amount of suffering that it created exceeded the amount of suffering it was designed to stop. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is what is happening to an industry in the United States of America. In a country that prides ourselves in majority rule, that prides ourselves even more in private property rights, i.e., example, if you own a horse, that is your horse. Take care of it. We do not question at all. In fact, my personal opinion couldn't be any stronger. All animals deserve to be treated humanely from birth until death, period. No argument should be there. But there is argument. And this argument is going to take place not only in the United States Congress, but in other governments around the world, I believe, already is. Cage layers. What size of cage should a chicken have? Sow stalls. What size? How should we take care of our pork? All of this is occurring, and most of the cases we are changing it without taking a good hard look at one of the guaranteed outcomes. Higher cost, lower efficiencies, and much of the goals we saw this morning regarding greenhouse gases, etc., are going to go up. But that part of the debate is not there because it is those interpreting what is humane treatment of our chickens, our pigs, and our cattle and how they should be raised. And those who honestly and truly believe that our pigs, our cows, our sheep, and our chickens should have the free access of the range and should not be hindered by man or woman in any form in their productivity. How is the world going to be fed? It is wonderful to have that debate from the standpoint of organic food. And in the United States, 4% of our market today is organic. And I used to oppose that, thought it was crazy, but boy, I was crazy. Now we have a very profitable market. And why should everyone not produce for the marketplace? And if you can pay more for your eggs, if you can pay more for your pork, if you can pay more for your beef in order to have it organically produced, I'm for you. Who could be against that? Let's say we double it in the United States or in your country. Go from 4 to 8. Let's double it again to 16. What about the 84% of the people in the United States or those extra billions in the world that are already starving, what are they going to do for their food if we choose in the developed and developing countries to deny them the technology that they will need? Those are the political discussions that are not yet being heard. But on horses, the message was delivered loud and clear. By majority rule, we lost the horse industry, or at least a big part of it. Remember those numbers that I showed you about the value? The desire of those who oppose the processing of horses in the United States is to reduce the number of horses. They make no bones about it. If you can't afford to feed your horse, you ought not to own it in the first place. Okay, what's wrong with that? Nothing. But show me an industry in which you eliminate the salvage value of the industry, and I will show you an industry that is going to have economic problems day in, day out, in, year out. If when you buy a horse and you pay $1,000 for that pony for your kids, you know that the value is not zero. It's zero minus the cost of hiring a veterinarian to euthanize it, and zero minus the cost to dispose of that horse, assuming you can find a place to dispose of it, the cost of which can sometimes go over $1,000. Deliberately. So, in conclusion, as I was asked to be on this program, they're a little careful about the title that we put up, because this is a very emotional subject. You ought to read the emails that I get from folks that differ with me. And I say, I don't know how to tell you this any more simply. If you have an opinion different than mine, I respect your opinion. I did when I was in Congress. I respect it today. But now our message to Congress, the unintended consequences. And I will submit to you, based on my meager knowledge of the last 50 years, if we in the meat industry, and that means the producer, the processor, and the seller of that which we produce, if we do not come together and do a better job of educating the consumer what we do and how we do it, the same will happen to all of our beef, pork, lamb, and chicken industry that is in the process of happening on the horse industry in the United States. But positively, the good news is we're turning it around in the United States. With an argument like I have been making to you briefly today, we're beginning to find more and more members of Congress that say, okay, we agree, but really it's a private property issue. And if a person does not object to their horse being processed for human consumption and sold to the world, why should I stand in their way? Why does government think it knows better than I do? And I hope that just as I remember one of our best customers from Texas for the horses that we sold was France. And I hope that we will, again, have the opportunity to sell our horses to you if you wish to buy them, that we will find ways to overcome through science the concerns raised by some, that the injections of the various chemicals that go into our horses, particularly race horses, are somehow doing something bad to the meat. We all know that's not true. But you've got to prove it scientifically, and you've got to prove it in a way in which the American and the world consumer will believe us. Thank you for having me.